The laughter started before Tyler even reached his locker. He could hear it echoing down the third-floor hallway of Daegu International Academy, that particular pitch of Korean teenagers finding something hilarious at someone else's expense. His stomach dropped because he knew, somehow he just knew, it was about him. Again. The 17-year-old American transferred here 6 months ago when his dad got relocated for Samsung, and every single day felt like walking through a minefield of cultural landmines he didn't even know existed until they exploded in his face. He rounded the corner and saw them. A cluster of about 15 students gathered around his locker, phones out, recording. His locker door hung open, and someone had plastered the inside with printed screenshots. Tyler's face burned as he got closer and saw what they were. Messages. His messages. The ones he'd sent to Mina 3 weeks ago, confessing how he felt. About her. How beautiful he thought she was. How being in Korea felt less lonely when she smiled at him during English class. Except Mina was standing right there in the crowd, laughing behind her hand with her friends. And Tyler realized, with crushing certainty, that she'd shown everyone. She'd screenshot everything and turned his private feelings into a public joke. Oh. "Look, the American boy is here," said Junho, the class president and resident golden boy who seemed to make it his personal mission to remind Tyler he didn't belong. Junho's English was perfect, which somehow made everything worse. "We were just admiring your poetry. Very romantic, very desperate." The crowd laughed harder. Someone had drawn hearts around the screenshots with red marker, and underneath someone else had written in English, "Foreigner can't take a hint." Tyler's hands shook as he reached for his locker, trying to pull the papers down, but Junho stepped in front of him. We're not done yet. Mina wants to give you an answer to your confession." Mina stepped forward, her ponytail swishing, and Tyler felt a flutter of desperate hope until he saw her face. That wasn't kindness in her eyes. That was cruelty. "Tyler, see," she said in Korean, knowing he could understand but still spoke slowly, like he was stupid. "You're nice for a foreigner, but I could never date someone like you. You don't understand anything about Korea. You eat lunch alone. You don't even bow correctly. My parents would die of shame." The hallway erupted. Tyler stood there, 6 feet tall, but feeling about 3 inches high, while students recorded his humiliation for what would probably be TikTok or Instagram by lunch period. He grabbed his textbooks with trembling hands, slammed his locker shut, and walked away, while Junho called after him in sing-song English, "Don't cry, American boy. Maybe. Go back to your country if Korea's too hard." Tyler didn't go to class. He couldn't. He walked straight through the school gates, ignoring the security guard's shout, and kept walking through the unfamiliar streets of Daegu until his legs burned and his eyes dried out from the wind. He ended up in some neighborhood he'd never seen before. Traditional hanok houses with curved tile roofs pressed between modern apartments. Narrow alleys, barely wide enough for a person to walk through. Everything here reminded him he was a stranger. The street signs he could barely read. The old women who stared at him like he'd landed from Mars. The smell of kimchi and sewage, and something else he couldn't identify that seemed to permeate every Korean city he'd been to. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from his dad asking where he was, messages from his homeroom teacher, messages from numbers he didn't recognize, probably classmates sending him the videos of his humiliation. Tyler turned his phone off and kept walking. He thought about his mom back in Arizona. The divorce happened right before the move, and she'd fought so hard against Tyler going to Korea with his dad. But the judge said something about opportunities and international experience, and now, here he was, living in a country where he'd never fit in. Going to a school full of students who seemed to have a secret manual on how to make him feel like garbage. The worst part was the loneliness. Tyler had friends back home. He played baseball, went to parties, had a girlfriend for 8 months sophomore year. He was normal. But here in Korea, everything that made him normal back home made him weird. He was too tall, too loud, too direct, too American. He didn't understand the social hierarchies, or when to speak and when to shut up, or why everyone seemed to care so much about stuff that seemed completely meaningless. And trying to make friends felt impossible when half the Korean students ignored. Him and the other half treated him like an exotic pet or a punching bag. There were other foreign students at the academy, sure, but they mostly kept to themselves, and Tyler had tried to join their group during the first week, only to find they were just as cliquey as everyone else, just in English instead of Korean. His dad didn't get it. His dad loved Korea. His dad spoke fluent Korean and had Korean friends and went to company dinners and knew how to bow correctly and which hand to use when receiving business cards and all the other tiny rules that governed this country. Dad kept saying Tyler just needed to adapt and be patient and show respect for the culture. Like Tyler wasn't trying his absolute hardest every single day to do exactly that. But it didn't matter. He'd learned to bow, learned to use two hands when receiving things from teachers, learned to take his shoes off at the door, learned basic Korean phrases, and still everyone at school treated him like an idiot foreigner who couldn't possibly understand their superior way of doing things. Tyler found himself at the base of a small mountain, or what Koreans called a mountain, but what looked more like a big hill to his American eyes. A hiking trail wound upward through pine trees, and without really deciding to, Tyler started climbing. The physical exertion felt good, better than sitting in his tiny dorm room, better than facing his dad's disappointment, better than seeing those screenshots plastered everywhere tomorrow because there was no way this would blow over quickly. The trail got steeper, and Tyler's legs screamed, but he pushed harder, sweat soaking through his uniform shirt even though it was only March and still cold. He needed to hurt. He needed something to distract from the crushing weight in his chest, the feeling that he'd made a terrible mistake being vulnerable, that he should have known better, that of course Mina didn't actually like him back. He'd been so stupid, so desperate for connection that he'd mistaken basic friendliness for something more. After about 40 minutes of climbing, Tyler reached a small clearing with a wooden pavilion overlooking the city. Daegu spread out below, all apartment blocks and concrete and neon signs starting to glow in the late afternoon light. He sat on the pavilion steps and finally let himself feel it. The embarrassment, the anger, the bone-deep exhaustion of constantly feeling like he didn't belong anywhere. He put his head in his hands and tried not to cry because crying about this felt pathetic. But his shoulders shook anyway, and hot tears slipped through his fingers. He hated Korea. He hated this school. He hated his dad for bringing him here and his mom for not fighting harder and himself for being so weak and foreign and wrong. Something rustled behind him. Tyler whipped around, wiping his eyes quickly, expecting to see a hiker or maybe a stray dog. Instead, there was a small shrine. Tyler hadn't noticed it before, partially hidden by the pavilion's shadow. It looked old, really old, with weathered stone and faded paint. But in front of the shrine sat something that definitely wasn't old. A glass sphere about the size of a baseball, perfectly clear, sitting on a bed of dead leaves like someone had just placed it there. Tyler stood up slowly and walked over. The sphere caught the fading sunlight and refracted it into rainbow patterns across his hands. He shouldn't touch it. Everything in his rational mind said this was probably some kind of religious offering, or art installation, or something important he'd mess up by touching because that's what he did in Korea. Constantly touch and break invisible rules. But his hand reached out anyway, drawn by something he couldn't name. And the moment his fingers closed around the cool glass surface, the world tilted. The sphere turned black in his hand. Not black like it had been painted, but black like the color was pouring into it from somewhere else, flooding the glass with darkness that swirled and moved like living smoke. Tyler tried to drop it but couldn't. His fingers had locked around the sphere against his will, and the darkness was spreading, crawling up his arm like ink through water, and oh God, it hurt. It burned cold and freezing and wrong, and Tyler opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The darkness covered his vision. He fell to his knees, still clutching the sphere, feeling the cold spread through his chest and down his legs and into his skull, and for a terrifying moment Tyler thought he was dying, that he'd somehow found a cursed object on a Korean mountain, and this was how his pathetic life would end, killed by something he didn't understand in a country that never wanted him. Then the darkness stopped. The pain stopped. Tyler was still kneeling in the clearing, still holding the sphere, but the glass was clear again and the sun was lower and everything looked normal except Tyler felt different, wrong, hollow. He dropped the sphere, and it rolled into the leaves without breaking. His hands looked normal, his body felt normal. But inside, something fundamental had shifted, like a piece of him had been scooped out and replaced with empty space. Tyler stood up on shaking legs and looked at his reflection in the pavilion's window. Same face, same messy brown hair, same uniform. But his eyes looked different somehow, darker, and when he blinked he saw after-images of the darkness swirling behind his eyelids. He needed to get back. His dad was probably freaking out. School had definitely called. Tyler stumbled back down the mountain trail, his body moving on autopilot while his mind tried to process what had just happened. Maybe he'd had a panic attack. Maybe the stress had finally broken something in his brain, and he'd hallucinated the whole thing. That made more sense than magic spheres on Korean mountains. Except when Tyler reached the bottom of the trail and checked his phone, turning it back on. Only 30 minutes had passed. 30 minutes. The entire climb, the crying, the sphere, the darkness, everything had somehow compressed into half an hour. That wasn't possible. The walk up alone had taken 40 minutes. He had 63 messages and 14 missed calls. Tyler ignored them all and walked back toward his dorm, which was thankfully separate from the main school building. His roommate, another American kid named Marcus, who mostly ignored him, wouldn't be back until late because of soccer practice. Tyler needed to be alone. He needed to think. He needed to figure out what was happening to him because the hollow feeling in his chest was growing, spreading, and with it came something else. A sensation, an awareness. Tyler could feel the space around him in a way he'd never felt before. Like the air itself had texture and weight, and he could somehow sense the shape of it. He stopped walking. There was a convenience store to his right, the usual GS25 that existed on every Korean corner. An old man was walking toward the entrance, his arms full of grocery bags, and Tyler watched as the man struggled to reach for the door handle without dropping anything. Without thinking, without meaning to, Tyler reached out with that hollow, feeling in his chest, and the door swung open on its own. The old man paused, looked at the door, shrugged and walked through. Tyler's heart hammered. He looked at his hand. Nothing unusual. But that had been him. He'd done that. He'd reached out with something inside him, something new and hollow and wrong, and he'd moved the door without touching it. Tyler ducked into an alley and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Okay, this was insane. This wasn't real. Magic wasn't real. Telekinesis wasn't real. Korea was a modern country with Samsung and K-pop and high-speed internet, not a place where mysterious spheres gave people superpowers. Except his hand was shaking, and the hollow feeling was still there, and Tyler knew, with absolute certainty, that something had changed. He focused on that feeling, that awareness of space, and looked at an empty soju bottle lying near a dumpster. He reached out with his mind, with whatever the sphere had put inside him, and the bottle rattled. Then rolled, then lifted 3 inches off the ground before Tyler's concentration broke, and it dropped with a clink. No way! Tyler did it again. And again. Each time the bottle moved easier, lifted higher, and the hollow feeling in his chest grew more comfortable, less frightening, more like a muscle he was learning to flex. He could move things with his mind. Tyler's brain raced through the possibilities, through years of comic books and superhero movies, through the immediate practical applications of telekinesis at a Korean high school where everyone treated him like dirt. No, he couldn't think like that. He couldn't use this for revenge. That was villain origin story territory. But then he remembered Mina's face, Junho's laughter, the screenshots, the videos, the 6 months of constant grinding humiliation and loneliness and being treated like he was less than human because he had the wrong passport. Maybe he could scare them, just a little, just enough to make them think twice before making him their target again. Tyler walked the rest of the way to his dorm with his head down. But inside, something burned brighter than it had in months. He spent the entire night in his dorm room practicing. Marcus came home, grunted a greeting, and passed out on his bed, with headphones on, oblivious. Tyler sat cross-legged on his floor and worked on control. He started with his pencil, making it roll across his desk, then making it float, then making it spin in midair. The hollow feeling in his chest responded like a well, like he could dip into it and pull out power, and the more he used it, the deeper the well seemed to go. By 2 in the morning, Tyler could lift his textbook. By 4, he could move multiple objects at once. By 6, when the sun started rising over Daegu and his alarm went off for school, Tyler could create small bursts of force strong enough to crack the tile in his bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror. Still the same face. Still the same American kid who didn't fit in. But his eyes held something new now, something that looked almost like hope. Tyler went to school. He walked through the gates with his head up for the first time in months, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed him everywhere. Sure enough, the screenshots were everywhere. Someone had made photocopies and taped them to walls. Someone else had created a meme format with his most embarrassing messages. The TikTok video from yesterday had 73,000 views. Tyler's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to breathe, to stay calm, to not reveal anything. First period was Korean history, which Tyler barely understood on a good day. He sat in his usual spot at the back while Junho and his friends whispered and laughed in the rows ahead. The teacher, Mrs. Park, taught entirely in Korean and seemed to take personal offense whenever Tyler asked for clarification. Today she was explaining something about the Joseon dynasty, while Tyler tried to focus on looking normal, on not accidentally making her whiteboard markers float off the tray. Then Junho raised his hand and asked in Korean, "Teacher, is it appropriate for foreign students to sexually harass Korean girls through messages? Shouldn't there be consequences?" The class erupted in murmurs. Mrs. Park's eyes found Tyler, and her expression hardened. "Tyler C., is there something you want to tell the class?" Tyler's Korean was functional, but not great, and he stumbled through a response about how he'd just been friendly, how he didn't harass anyone, how this was a misunderstanding. Mrs. Park didn't look convinced. "In Korea, we respect boundaries. Perhaps you need additional lessons on proper behavior. See me after class." Tyler's vision went red. The hollow feeling in his chest pulsed hot and angry, responding to his emotions. And suddenly the textbooks on Mrs. Park's desk slid 6 inches to the right. Everyone stared. Mrs. Park picked up the books with a frown, muttered something about the desk being uneven, and continued teaching. But Tyler felt it. The power responding to his anger. He needed to be careful. He needed control. Lunch period arrived, and Tyler went to the cafeteria, got his tray of kimchi and rice and mystery meat, and sat alone like always. He was halfway through eating when Junho and 3 of his friends surrounded his table. "American boy," Junho said cheerfully, "I heard Mrs. Park is recommending you for disciplinary review. Maybe they'll send you back to America. Wouldn't that be nice?" Tyler looked up at him, really looked at him. Junho with his perfect hair and perfect smile and perfect life, who had never spent a single day feeling out of place or alone or wrong. "Leave me alone, Junho." "Or what? You'll cry about it? Write me a love confession too?" Junho's friends laughed. Tyler felt the power coiling in his chest, felt the hollow space expanding, felt his control slipping. The empty lunch tray on the bulk in table next to him rattled, just slightly. Junho didn't notice, but Tyler did. He stood up quickly, grabbed his bag and walked away while they called insults after him in Korean. He needed air. He needed space. He needed to not hurt someone by accident. Tyler found himself on the school's rooftop, which was technically off limits, but the lock had been broken for weeks. The city spread out around him, and up here the wind was cold and clean and Korean-free. He sat on the edge, with his legs dangling, and practiced. Small things, making pebbles float, moving his phone without touching it, creating tiny currents, a force that rippled the air like heat waves. The control was getting easier, more intuitive, but the anger was harder to manage. Every time he thought about Mina, or Junho, or the screenshots, or the 6 months of accumulated hurt, the power surged and became chaotic. He needed to be smarter about this. Strategic. After school, Tyler stayed late in the library, pretending to study, but actually watching. Junho had basketball practice in the gymnasium. His route back to the locker room went through a hallway that was always empty this time of day. Tyler waited in an alcove, heart pounding, telling himself this was just to scare Junho, just to level the playing field a tiny bit. When Junho walked past, whistling some K-pop song, Tyler reached out with his power and slammed every single locker door in the hallway shut at once. The sound was deafening, like a drumline made of metal. Junho jumped about a foot in the air and spun around eyes wide. Tyler stepped out of the alcove. Weird, right? All those lockers closing at the exact same time. Junho's face cycled through confusion, fear, and then hardened into anger. Did you rig something? Is this a prank? No prank. Just wanted to talk to you alone. Tyler walked closer, and with each step, the lights above them flickered. Not a lot. Just enough to notice, just enough to be unsettling. About what? Junho's voice had lost some of its confidence. About leaving me alone, about deleting those videos, about telling everyone to back off. Tyler focused, and the basketball in Junho's bag lifted out and began floating between them, spinning slowly in midair. Junho's face went white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The basketball hung there for 3 long seconds before Tyler let it drop. It bounced twice on the tile floor, impossibly loud in the silent hallway. What are you? Something happened to me, Tyler said quietly. Something changed, and I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done being the joke. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop. You're going to make them stop. And if you don't, next time it won't be a basketball. Tyler turned and walked away, leaving Junho standing frozen in the flickering hallway. And for the first time since moving to Korea, Tyler felt powerful instead of powerless. That night, the screenshots came down. The videos went private. Junho must have told his friends something because the whispers in the hallway changed from mockery to something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Tyler walked through school the next day and people moved out of his way. Not obviously, but enough. Enough that he noticed. During lunch, a Korean girl named Seri, who'd never spoken to him before, sat down at his table and asked, in careful English, if she could join him. Tyler said yes, stunned, and they talked about nothing important. But it was conversation, actual friendly conversation with someone who wasn't looking at him like a freak or a target. When Mina walked past with her friends, she didn't laugh. She looked away quickly, and Tyler felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction that he immediately felt guilty about. This power was changing him. He could feel it. The hollow space in his chest was growing, spreading into parts of his personality, making him harder, colder, more willing to hurt people who hurt him first. Was that wrong? Tyler didn't know anymore. All he knew was that for the first time, in 6 months, he could breathe at school. The weekend came and Tyler went back to the mountain. He needed to understand what had happened to him. Needed to find that shrine again, maybe find answers. The hike was easier this time, his body stronger somehow, like the power had enhanced more than just his mind. He reached the clearing and the pavilion, but the shrine looked different now. Older, more weathered, like decades had passed instead of days. The glass sphere was gone. In its place sat a small note, written in English in handwriting, that looked ancient. The hollow glass chooses carriers in moments of breaking. Use it to rebuild or destroy. The choice shapes the emptiness inside. Tyler read it 3 times. Carriers. Plural. That meant others had held the sphere before. Others had been given this power. Where were they now? What had they chosen? The note dissolved in his hands, literally turned to dust, and blew away in the wind. And Tyler was left, with more questions than answers. He spent hours at the clearing, practicing, pushing his abilities further. He could lift larger objects now, create barriers of force, move things across the clearing without line of sight. The power seemed limitless, bound only by his concentration, in the depth of that hollow space in his chest. Monday morning, everything changed. Tyler walked into school to find police cars outside and students clustered in worried groups. Something had happened over the weekend. Something bad. Tyler grabbed Seri when he saw her and asked what was going on. It's Junho, she said in a hushed voice. He disappeared Saturday night. His parents called the police. No one can find him. Tyler's stomach dropped. Disappeared? What do you mean, disappeared? His phone is off, his credit cards haven't been used, there's no trace of him anywhere. Siri looked scared. Some people are saying maybe he ran away, but Junho wouldn't do that. He loves his life here. Tyler's mind raced. He'd threatened Junho on Friday. He'd used his powers to scare him. What if Junho had tried to prove something, tried to find evidence of what Tyler could do, and something had gone wrong? What if this was Tyler's fault? The police interviewed students all week. They asked Tyler questions because apparently someone had mentioned he and Junho had conflict, but Tyler's dad hired a lawyer just in case, and nothing came of it. Junho was simply gone, vanished from Daegu like he'd never existed. The school was subdued. Classes continued, but everyone moved through them like ghosts. Tyler couldn't shake the guilt. He practiced with his powers obsessively, pushing harder, trying to sense something, anything that might help him find Junho. Because despite everything, despite the bullying and the humiliation and the screenshots, Tyler didn't want Junho dead or hurt or missing. He just wanted to be left alone. On Friday, exactly 1 week after Junho disappeared, Tyler felt something new. A pull. A sensation like someone was tugging on the hollow space in his chest, trying to get his attention. He followed it during lunch period, skipping the cafeteria, walking through hallways and out a side door he'd never used before. The pull led him to the old maintenance building behind the gymnasium, a concrete block structure that was supposedly condemned. The door was slightly open. Tyler pushed through and found himself in darkness that smelled like mold and copper. "Hello?" His voice echoed wrong, like the space was bigger than it should be. A light flickered on in the back corner and Tyler's blood went cold. Junho was there. But not the Junho from school. This Junho was different. His eyes were completely black, like ink had been poured into them, and his skin had a gray pallor that looked sickly in the fluorescent light. He was floating 6 inches off the ground.
"Tyler," Yuno said, and his voice had harmonics that shouldn't be there, like multiple people speaking at once. "You found me. Good. What happened to you? Are you okay?" Tyler kept his distance, power already coiling in his chest defensively. "I'm better than okay. I'm transformed." Juno smiled, and it was all wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. "You showed me what was possible. Your little trick with the lockers and the basketball. I knew there had to be a source. I knew you weren't special on your own, so I went looking." He gestured around the maintenance building, and Tyler saw for the first time that the walls were covered in drawings, symbols, Korean characters mixed with something older, something that hurt to look at directly. "Found a different shrine, different glass, black glass, not clear. It showed me what the hollow space really is. It's not emptiness, Tyler, it's a doorway." And I went through. Juno's body flickered like a bad video connection, and for a split second, Tyler saw something behind him, something massive and dark that existed in more dimensions than 3. "You need to come through too. You need to see what's waiting. What's been waiting in Korea for thousands of years, sleeping under the mountains, in the temples, in the old places. The glass spheres are keys, and we're the ones chosen to open everything." Tyler backed toward the door. This was insane. This wasn't about superpowers anymore. This was something else, something dangerous and wrong that made every instinct in his body scream run. "I'm calling the police. You need help." "Help?" Yuno laughed, and the sound made the air vibrate. "I'm trying to help you. Don't you see? We don't have to be powerless anymore. Not you with your foreign weakness, not me with my perfectionist prison. We can be more. We can remake everything, starting with this school, this city, this country that hurt us both." He raised his hand, and the entire building shuddered. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. "In 3 days, something is coming through the doorway I opened. Something old, something hungry. You can either join me or get swept away with everyone else." Tyler ran. He burst out of the maintenance building and didn't stop running until he reached the main school entrance, where security and teachers were everywhere because the old building was visibly shaking now, smoke or darkness pouring from its windows. The school evacuated. Emergency services arrived. Tyler watched from across the street as firefighters and police surrounded the maintenance building, and he waited for them to bring Yuno out in handcuffs or a stretcher or something. But when they finally entered, When they searched every inch of that building, there was nothing. No Juno. No black glass. Just empty rooms and those disturbing symbols on the walls that no one could identify. Tyler stood in the crowd of students and felt the hollow space in his chest pulsing like a second heartbeat. 3 days. Juno had said 3 days. Tyler pulled out his phone and started researching. Korean mythology, glass artifacts, doorways between worlds, mountain spirits, everything he could think of that might explain what was happening. By midnight, he had a theory. By morning, he had a plan. And by the time the sun rose over Daegu on Saturday, painting the city in red and gold light that looked almost apocalyptic, Tyler was back on the mountain at the shrine, staring at the empty spot where the clear glass sphere had been, holding in his hand a piece of broken mirror he'd found in the maintenance building. The mirror reflected his face, but in the reflection his eyes were starting to darken at the edges, like ink seeping into clear water. Tyler had 2 days to figure out how to stop whatever Juno had unleashed, and he was pretty sure the answer involved going through a doorway he might not come back from. Behind him, the city of Daegu stretched out vast and uncaring, and somewhere in its streets, in its schools, in its mountains and temples and forgotten places, something ancient was waking up, something that had chosen Tyler and Junho as its keys to the modern world. Tyler looked at his reflection one last time, then threw the mirror piece as hard as he could off the mountain. It tumbled through the air, catching sunlight, before disappearing into the forest below. He didn't need a doorway. He was going to find another way. And when Monday came, when whatever Junho had promised started to manifest at Daegu International Academy, Tyler would be ready. He had to be. Because he might be a foreign kid who didn't fit in, but he was also the idiot who'd picked up mysterious glass on a Korean mountain, and that made this his responsibility. The hollow space in his chest pulsed stronger, deeper, and for the first time, Tyler didn't try to control it or understand it. He just let it fill him, let it spread through his body like dark water, and when he opened his eyes, the whole mountain seemed to ripple, like reality itself was paper-thin, and something massive was pressing against it from the other side, waiting to break through. 3 days. 3 days until everything changed. Tyler started walking back down the mountain, power crackling around his fingertips like lightning, and behind him, carved into the shrine's weathered stone in letters that definitely hadn't been there before, a message appeared in English. The carrier has chosen. Let the Hollow War begin. The Korean Barbecue celebration lasted exactly 43 minutes before everything changed. Tyler sat in the crowded restaurant with Emma, Daniel, and Connor, the smell of grilling meat and garlic filling the air while they tried to act like normal teenagers instead of people who just saved reality from collapsing. Emma was demonstrating how to use the metal chopsticks without dropping everything. Connor was complaining about the spice level in his kimchi, and Daniel was translating the menu for them when Tyler felt it. A pull, not physical, but deeper. The hollow space in his chest suddenly pulsed with recognition, like it was responding to something nearby, something similar. Tyler's head whipped toward the restaurant entrance, and his heart stopped. Siri stood there, scanning the crowded space, her eyes landing on Tyler with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and Tyler saw it immediately, the darkness at the edges of her irises, the same mark he and the other carriers had. But that was impossible. They'd found all 4 clear glass carriers. Mrs. Choi had been certain about the number. 4 was always the pattern. Sari started walking toward their table, weaving between other diners, and with each step closer, the hollow space in Tyler's chest pulsed harder, faster, syncing with something he couldn't see but could definitely feel. Tyler? Emma followed his gaze. Who's that? A friend from school. Sari. Tyler stood up as she reached their table, his mind racing. How long had she been like this? How had he not noticed? We need to talk, Sari said quietly, her English careful and precise. Alone, now. The other carriers exchanged glances. Tyler could feel their tension, their protective instincts rising, but he nodded. It's okay, I'll be right back. He followed Sari out of the restaurant and into the alley beside it, where the sounds of the city felt muted and distant. She turned to face him and crossed her arms. I saw what you did to the hallway last week. When Junho was bothering you, the lockers slamming shut all at once. That wasn't wind. Tyler's mind flashed back to that moment, to using his powers for the first time in public, to threatening Junho. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Siri's voice was sharp. I've been watching you since Friday. The way you move differently, the way objects around you tremble when you're upset, the way your eyes changed. She stepped closer, and Tyler felt the hollow space in his chest surge, reaching toward her like a magnet finding metal. You're not the only one who's different, Tyler. She reached into her shirt and pulled out a necklace. Hanging from the delicate chain was a tiny shard of glass, clear like crystal, but with something moving inside it. A faint pulse of light that matched the rhythm of Tyler's own hollow space. I found this 3 years ago, Sari said quietly. At a temple in the mountains with my grandmother. She was praying and I wandered off, and there it was, just sitting on a stone altar, waiting. When I touched it, it shattered. Most of it turned to dust, but this one piece remained, and it merged with me, became part of me. She held the shard up and Tyler watched the light pulse stronger. For 3 years I thought I was going crazy. I could do small things, make objects move slightly, sense when someone was lying, feel the shape of spaces around me, but it was weak, inconsistent, like trying to hear a radio station that's barely in range. Tyler's breath caught. But now it's stronger. Ever since Friday, ever since you changed. Siri met his eyes. I can feel you, Tyler. Feel your power, and when you're close, my own power gets clearer, louder, like we're resonating. She reached out her hand. Touch the shard. I need to show you something. Tyler hesitated. After everything with Yunho and the Void King, touching mysterious glass seemed like a terrible idea. But something in Sari's expression, a desperate need to be understood, made him reach out. His fingers closed around the small shard, and the world exploded. Time stopped, or slowed. Tyler couldn't tell which. The alley around them froze mid-motion, a piece of trash suspended in the air where it had been blowing past. Car headlights on the street beyond turned into solid beams of light that looked like they could be touched. Colors inverted for a split second, the dark alley becoming bright, the lights becoming shadows, Siri's black hair turning white before snapping back to normal. And then Tyler heard it, whispering. Not in Korean or English or any language he recognized, but somehow he understood the meaning behind the sounds. Ancient, urgent, warning. The hollow spaces in both their chests synchronized completely, and Tyler felt Siri's power flowing into him and his power flowing into her, creating a circuit, a connection that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. The world around them began to shimmer like heat waves rising from pavement, and suddenly they weren't in the alley anymore. They were somewhere else. Someone else. Ancient Korea stretched out before them, but not the tourist-friendly historical version Tyler had seen in museums and cultural sites. This was raw, primal, a landscape where reality itself looked thinner, more malleable. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touching clouds that moved wrong, swirling in patterns that hurt to look at directly. And everywhere, Tyler saw people. Carriers. He knew them immediately, even though they looked nothing like modern Koreans. Monks in simple robes with eyes completely darkened, moving boulders with gestures. Shamans in elaborate ceremonial dress, creating barriers of pure force around villages. Soldiers with hollow spaces so deep and powerful that reality bent around them like water around a stone. Even children, young and small, but radiating power that made the air shimmer. But they weren't united. Tyler watched in horror as the vision shifted, showing him the split. Some carriers had clear glass, their power defensive, protective, creating shields and barriers and safe spaces. Others had black glass, their power aggressive, consuming, tearing holes in reality itself to access something that lurked beyond. The two groups fought, not with weapons, but with pure force of will and reality manipulation. Tyler saw a monk with clear glass create a dome of protection around a burning village, while black glass carriers tried to shatter it from outside, their attacks leaving cracks in space itself that leaked darkness. He saw shamans on both sides carving symbols into the ground, into stone, into the very air, symbols that looked exactly like what Tyler had seen in Junho's maintenance building. The war wasn't about territory or resources or politics. It was about what reality should be. The clear carriers wanted to preserve the world as it was, to protect humanity from the things that waited in the spaces between. The black carriers wanted to tear down the barriers completely, to merge with the void, to become something more than human, even if it meant destroying everything in the process. The vision accelerated, centuries compressing into moments. Tyler saw seals being created, hollow carriers sacrificing themselves to trap the Void King between worlds, saw the glass spheres being scattered across Korea, hidden in temples and mountains and forgotten places waiting, saw the slow decline as modernization made people stop believing, made the barriers weaken, made the old protections fail. Then the vision focused on one figure, an old carrier, gender unclear, wrapped in robes that seemed to be made of solidified space itself. They stood at the boundary between worlds, one foot in reality and one foot in the void, and their eyes locked onto Tyler and Sari with an intensity that burned. The old carrier's mouth moved, and words echoed through the vision in that same incomprehensible language that somehow Tyler understood perfectly. When the black doorway opens again, no single carrier will be enough. The hollow must unite or all will be consumed. Seek the others. The war is not over. It has only just begun. The carrier reached out a hand and touched something in the air, and Tyler saw ripples spread out from that touch, spreading across time and space, and he realized with growing horror that this wasn't just a vision of the past. This was a message, a warning, a prophecy. The old carrier spoke again, their voice layered with harmonics that made Tyler's bones vibrate. The black side grows stronger. They gather their own. Clear and black will clash again in the city of mountains, and this time there will be no seal, only victory or extinction. The vision shattered. Tyler and Sari gasped simultaneously, stumbling apart in the alley, time resuming its normal flow, the piece of trash completing its tumble across the pavement, car headlights returning to normal light instead of solid beams. Tyler's hands were shaking. His hollow space felt raw, exposed, like someone had reached inside him and rearranged his organs. Sari looked equally shaken, her face pale, one hand pressed against the shard hanging from her necklace. "Did you see that?" Tyler's voice came out hoarse. "Did you see all of it?" Ancient carriers, the war, the split between clear and black glass. Sari's eyes were wide. Tyler, that carrier at the end, they were talking about now. About us. About Daegu. They said no single carrier will be enough. Tyler's mind raced, connecting pieces. But we already stopped Junho. We already closed the doorway. 4 of us together, we cut his connection to the Void King. Sari shook her head slowly. You stopped one doorway, one anchor point. But Tyler, if Junho found black glass, what makes you think he was the only one? The words hit Tyler like ice water. He thought about the vision, about how the black carriers had gathered together, formed teams, coordinated their attacks, thought about how the clear carriers had done the same, thought about the old carriers warning about the black side growing stronger, gathering their own. There are more black glass carriers, Tyler said slowly. Junho wasn't alone. He's part of a team, and you need to be part of one too, a real one. Sari grabbed his arm. Tyler, I've had this power for 3 years, weak and inconsistent, but I learned things. I can manipulate space in ways you can't. I can bend sound, create illusions, affect gravity in small areas. When we connected just now, when our hollow spaces synchronized, I felt what you can do. Raw force, aggressive power, barriers and attacks. We're different types of carriers, but we complement each other. Tyler thought about Emma, Daniel, and Connor waiting in the restaurant. I already have a team, 4 clear glass carriers who helped me stop Junho. 4 who just discovered their powers days ago, Sari countered. I'm not saying replace them, I'm saying expand. If there are black glass carriers gathering in Daegu right now, planning something bigger than one doorway, we need every clear carrier we can find. And I know where to look. She pulled out her phone and showed Tyler a map with several locations marked. These are places where I've felt resonance over the years. Weak signatures that I couldn't understand until now. Temples, old neighborhoods, even a cafeteria at the university. There are others, Tyler. Latent carriers. People who might not even know what they are yet. We need to find them before the black side does. Tyler looked at the map, then back at the restaurant where his team waited. Everything was moving so fast. 3 days ago, he was just a bullied American kid trying to survive Korean high school. Now he was recruiting for a supernatural war that had apparently been going on for centuries. Okay, he said finally, but we do this together. All of us. You meet my team, we combine resources, we find the others. Siri nodded. Agreed. But Tyler, there's something else you need to know. Something I saw in your memories during the connection. Tyler tensed. What? Your father. There was a moment, just a flash, but I saw him touching something glass-like years ago, before you were born. It was buried, hidden, but the resonance was there. She met his eyes. I think your dad might have been a carrier once, or at least touched a sphere and rejected it. And if that's true, if there's a hereditary component or a bloodline connection, it might explain why you were drawn to the mountain shrine, why the sphere chose you. Tyler's world tilted slightly. His dad? A carrier? The man who loved Korea, who spoke perfect Korean, who seemed to understand this country in ways Tyler never could. Had his dad been hiding something this whole time? That's a problem for later, Tyler said, pushing down the surge of questions and emotions. Right now, we need to focus on finding other carriers and figuring out what Junho's team is planning. They walked back into the restaurant together. Emma, Daniel, and Connor looked up as they approached, their expressions wary, power coiled and ready even though they were sitting at a barbecue table. Tyler could feel their protective instincts, their suspicion of this new person. Everyone, this is Siri. She's been a carrier for 3 years. Tyler gestured for Siri to sit. And she just showed me a vision that suggests we have a much bigger problem than we thought. Over the next hour, while the restaurant filled and emptied around them, Tyler and Siri explained everything. The vision of ancient Korea, the war between clear and black carriers, the old carriers' warning, the possibility of more black glass teams gathering in Daegu. Emma was the first to speak when they finished. So what you're saying is that stopping Junho was just the opening move. The real war hasn't started yet. Exactly, Sari confirmed. The black carriers are organized. They have a goal, a purpose. They want to tear down the barriers between our world and the void completely. Juno was just one anchor point. If they create multiple doorways simultaneously across the city, the combined strain on reality would be catastrophic. Daniel pulled up his laptop and started typing. If we're looking for latent carriers, I can cross-reference the locations Sari marked with recent reports of unusual phenomena, strange occurrences, unexplained events, people posting about weird experiences online. Connor, despite being the youngest, was thinking tactically. We need to split up, cover more ground. Tyler and Sari should work together since their hollow spaces synchronize, but the rest of us can investigate the other locations. No splitting up, Emma said firmly. That's how people die in horror movies. We stay in pairs minimum. Tyler nodded. Agreed. Tomorrow, we'll start with the closest location on Sari's map. But tonight, we need to prepare. We just fought the Void King and barely survived. If we're going to face multiple black carriers, we need to train, get stronger, learn to coordinate our abilities better. They spent the rest of the evening at Daniel's university apartment, the largest space available, practicing. Tyler and Sari discovered that when they synchronized their hollow spaces intentionally, they could create effects neither could achieve alone. Tyler's raw force combined with Sari's spatial manipulation allowed them to create barriers that bent light and sound, making them invisible. They could slow time in small areas. They could even create pockets of altered gravity that made objects float or slam to the ground with crushing force. Emma worked on precision, learning to move multiple small objects simultaneously instead of just one large object. Daniel focused on range, discovering he could sense hollow spaces up to half a mile away if he concentrated. Connor, the youngest but somehow the most adaptable, found he could create sharp, focused bursts of force that cut through solid materials like invisible blades. By midnight, they were exhausted, sweating, the apartment looking like a tornado had hit it, but they were better. Stronger, more coordinated. Tyler stood by the window looking out at Daegu's nightlights and felt the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. Somewhere out there, black glass carriers were gathering, planning, preparing to tear holes in reality. And Tyler's team of 6, no 5, he corrected himself. Junho was saved but not part of their group, was supposed to stop them. Thinking too hard, Sari said quietly, appearing beside him. I can feel your anxiety from across the room. Our hollow spaces are still partially synced. How do you turn that off? Tyler asked. The connection. It's distracting. You don't. Not completely. Once hollow spaces synchronize, they stay linked. It fades with distance and time, but the bond remains. She looked out at the city. I've been alone with this power for 3 years, Tyler, feeling things I couldn't explain, seeing the world differently, thinking I was losing my mind, having someone who understands, who shares this burden. It's a relief, but it's also terrifying because now I know what's really out there. Tyler thought about the vision, about the old carrier's warning, about the war that had been fought for centuries and was apparently starting again. Do you think we can win? Actually win, not just delay or hold the line? I don't know, Sari admitted, but I know we have to try. Because the alternative is letting reality break, and I'm not ready for that. The next morning arrived too quickly. Tyler barely slept, his dreams full of ancient battles and darkening doorways, and Junho's black eyes staring at him. He met the others at 7 a.m. at a small park near the first location on Sari's map, a traditional Hanok neighborhood in Old Daegu, preserved from modernization, where narrow alleys wound between ancient houses with curved tile roofs. According to Sari's notes, she'd felt a strong resonance here 2 years ago, near a small shrine dedicated to a minor mountain spirit. They walked through the quiet morning streets, the elderly residents just beginning their day, and Tyler felt it immediately, a pull, similar to what he'd felt when sensing other carriers, but different, older, deeper, like whatever was here had been waiting much longer than a few days. There, Sari pointed to a house at the end of a narrow alley. Smoke rose from its chimney, and through the window, Tyler could see someone moving inside. An old woman, maybe 70, preparing breakfast. She's a carrier? Connor sounded skeptical. She barely looked strong enough to lift a pot. Don't underestimate the elderly, Daniel murmured. In Korea, age means wisdom, and power doesn't care about physical strength. They approached the house cautiously. Tyler knocked on the door, unsure what to say. How did you ask someone if they had supernatural powers? The door opened, and the old woman looked out at them, her eyes scanning the group before landing on Tyler. Her expression didn't change, but Tyler saw her eyes, darker at the edges, much darker, almost completely black. You took long enough, she said in Korean accented English. I've been waiting since Friday for carriers to come find me. I felt the awakening, felt the barriers thinning, thought I might have to do this alone like last time. She stepped aside. Come in. We have much to discuss and very little time. The interior of the Hanok was traditional, with low tables and cushions on heated floors, but the walls were covered in symbols. The same symbols from Tyler's vision, from Yunho's building, carved or painted into every surface. Protection wards, Tyler realized. This woman knew exactly what she was dealing with. They sat in a circle while she prepared tea, her movements economical and precise despite her age. When everyone had a cup, she sat and fixed them with a stare that made Tyler feel like he was being evaluated. My name is Mrs. Han, she said. I was a carrier in the last awakening 60 years ago. Clear glass, like all of you. We fought black carriers throughout Korea, stopped 7 major doorway attempts, and finally managed to reinforce the seals. But it cost us. Of the 20 clear carriers who fought, only 3 survived. I'm the last one left alive. The group exchanged glances. 20 carriers, 7 doorway attempts, 3 survivors. The numbers weren't encouraging. How many black carriers were there? Emma asked quietly. 15 that we confirmed, but we suspected more, hiding, waiting for opportunities. Mrs. Han sipped her tea. The black glass makes them patient. It feeds on despair and emptiness, and those emotions make planning destruction easier than planning protection. They can wait decades for the right moment. Do you still have power? Tyler needed to know if she could fight alongside them. Mrs. Han held up her hand, and the air above her palm distorted, folded in on itself, creating a space that was simultaneously there and not there. My power is spatial folding, creating pockets of compressed space, useful for defense and containment. She closed her hand, and the distortion vanished. But I'm old. My hollow space has shrunk over the decades. I can maybe fight for 10 minutes before it exhausts me. You can't rely on me for heavy combat. But you can teach us. Siri said, you fought this war before. You survived. You know their tactics, their strategies, which is why I've been preparing. Mrs. Han stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a folder thick with papers. I've been monitoring Daegu for signs of black glass awakening, strange deaths, reality distortions, people disappearing or changing suddenly. Over the past week, I've identified at least 6 possible black carriers. She spread photographs across the table, and Tyler's blood ran cold. One of them was Yunho, but there were others. A university student Tyler didn't recognize, a businessman in his 30s, a teenage girl who looked eerily similar to Mina, the girl who'd humiliated Tyler, a middle-aged woman, an elderly man, 6 black carriers. Tyler's team had 5 clear carriers, now 6 with Mrs. Han. The numbers were almost even, but that assumed they could find all the clear carriers before the black side made their move. How do we find the others? Tyler asked. The remaining clear carriers. You said 20 fought last time. How many should there be this time? The pattern isn't fixed, Mrs. Han explained. It depends on how weak the barriers are, how many spheres activate. I estimate between 8 and 12 clear carriers in Daegu right now. Some may not know what they are yet. Some may have felt the change but suppressed it, frightened. We need to find them quickly. Daniel had been typing on his laptop throughout the conversation. I've been cross-referencing unusual social media activity, deleted posts, strange forum discussions in Daegu over the past week. I have 4 more possibles. 2 university students, 1 high school teacher, 1 restaurant owner. Then we split into teams, Tyler said, making the decision. 2-person pairs. We cover more ground but stay safe. Tyler and Siri together since our hollow spaces sync. Emma and Daniel. Connor and Mrs. Han. Connor looked like he wanted to protest being paired with the elderly woman, but something in Mrs. Han's expression made him stay quiet. We meet back here at sunset, Tyler continued. Compare notes. Bring any new carriers we find. Mrs. Han, can you contact Junho at the hospital? See if he remembers anything about the other black carriers, any plans they discussed? I'll try, Mrs. Han agreed. But black glass corruption is deep. Even saved, he may not remember clearly. Or he may lie to protect his former allies. They divided the list of locations and headed out. Tyler and Siri took the university campus, where 2 potential carriers had been identified. As they walked through the morning crowds of students, Tyler felt hyper-aware of everything. The way reality looked thinner in certain places, the way some people's eyes seemed darker at the edges, the sense of impending conflict that made his hollow space pulse with readiness. Tyler, Siri said quietly as they climbed stairs toward the library. When we find the other black carriers, when the real fight starts, we need to be prepared for the possibility that we can't save all of them like you saved Junho. Some may be too far gone. Some may choose the void willingly. Tyler thought about Junho's black eyes, his gray skin, the way the Void King had been using him as a doorway. Thought about how close they'd come to losing him completely. We save who we can. Stop the rest. That's all we can do. They found the first potential carrier in the library's study section. A girl about 20, hunched over textbooks, but Tyler could see the telltale darkness in her eyes, the way the air around her seemed to shimmer slightly. He and Sari approached carefully, sitting nearby, and Tyler reached out with his hollow space, sending a gentle pulse of recognition. The girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide, and Tyler saw the fear and relief war on her face. Someone finally understood. By sunset, Tyler and Sari had found 3 new carriers. Emma and Daniel found 2. Connor and Mrs. Han found 1, and brought information that Junho had woken up at the hospital and confirmed Mrs. Han's intelligence about the black carriers. There were 6 confirmed, possibly more hiding. They gathered at Mrs. Han's hanok, 11 people now, ranging from Connor at 13 to Mrs. Han at 70-something. 11 clear carriers against at least 6 black carriers, but Tyler knew the numbers didn't tell the whole story. The black carriers had the Void King's power backing them, had corruption that made them stronger and less hesitant. The clear carriers had protection and precision, but would that be enough? They're going to make their move soon, Mrs. Han said as they reviewed maps of Daegu. Multiple simultaneous doorways. The pattern from last time was to choose locations of spiritual significance, places where the barriers are already thin. temples, old shrines, historical sites, mountains. Daniel marked locations on his laptop. There are 14 major spiritual sites in Daegu metro area. If they hit even half of them simultaneously, we can't cover them all. Then we need to figure out which ones they'll prioritize, Sari said. Tyler, when you fought Junho, where was he? What location? The maintenance building at my school. Tyler frowned. But that's not spiritually significant. It's just an old building. No, Mrs. Han said slowly. That school was built on the site of a Joseon-era fortress. Battle site. Hundreds died there defending the city from invaders. The ground is soaked in death and conflict, perfect for weakening barriers. Tyler felt sick. His school, the place he went every day, where students laughed and studied and lived their normal lives, was built on a battlefield, and now black carriers were using it to tear holes in reality. We need more information, Emma said. We need to know their timeline, their exact locations, their strategy. We need a spy, Connor said bluntly. Everyone looked at him. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. We need someone on the inside of the black carrier team, someone who can feed us information. Tyler's mind immediately went to Junho, saved but potentially still connected to the black side. Could they trust him? Could they use him? Before anyone could respond, Mrs. Han's house shook. Not earthquake shaking, something else. Reality shaking. Tyler felt it through his hollow space, felt the barriers between worlds flexing, straining. It's starting, Mrs. Han whispered. They're testing the barriers, probing for weaknesses. Tyler stood, and the other carriers stood with him. 11 people, all carrying hollow spaces filled with power they barely understood, facing an enemy that wanted to unmake reality itself. Then we don't have time to plan perfectly. Tyler said, we train tonight. Tomorrow we find their locations, and when they make their move, we stop them. Not just this time. We end this. We reinforce the barriers so strongly that the black carriers can't try again for another 60 years. He looked around at his team. At Sari, who'd been alone for years. At Emma, Daniel, and Connor, who'd only had their powers for days. At Mrs. Han, who'd fought this war before and lost most of her team. At the 3 new carriers who looked terrified but determined. We're not the strongest, Tyler said. We're not the most experienced, but we're what's standing between Daegu and destruction. So let's make that enough. The house shook again, harder this time, and through the windows, Tyler could see the sky darkening despite it being early evening. Not clouds. Something else, the void pressing closer. The hollow war Mrs. Han had mentioned, the one that had raged for centuries, was about to begin again in modern Daegu, and Tyler's team of mismatched, barely trained, mostly foreign carriers was the first line of defense. Tyler felt the hollow space in his chest pulse strong and steady, felt Siri's power synchronizing with his, felt the other carriers' energies creating a web of connection that bound them together. They were ready, or they would be. They had to be. Because the alternative was unthinkable, and Tyler had already decided he wasn't going to let this city fall. Not his school, not his teammates. Not the place that had broken him and remade him into something stronger. The darkness pressed closer, and Tyler stood firm, 11 carriers standing with him, and somewhere in the city, 6 black carriers felt their defiance and began preparing for war. Tyler woke up to 17 missed calls and a message from Sari that made his blood run cold. Rachel's gone. Can't feel her hollow space anymore. Meet at Mrs. Han's now. Rachel Kim, the university student they'd recruited yesterday afternoon from the library. 20 years old, psychology major, American-born but moved to Korea for college. She'd been quiet during the evening training session, watchful, but Tyler had assumed she was just processing everything. The sudden awakening, the revelation about ancient wars, the responsibility of defending reality itself. It was a lot for anyone to handle. Tyler threw on clothes and ran the 3 blocks